Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Mind Sculptors podcast. I am your host, Callahan. On today's episode, we aren't going to rickroll you this week. Don't worry about it. I am joined by Josh from Elder Drunken Highlander to discuss how to get better at cEDH through playing casually at Casual Commander. This was a really great conversation. Josh and I got to talk a little bit about this at Oktoberfest back in November, and we recorded this episode at the beginning of December. And yes, I know the title is How to Succeed in cEDH without really trying, but that was just a little nod at my theater friends out there in the audience. This actually was a really good conversation, and I'm really excited for you guys to hear it. So please enjoy. But before we get into that, let's take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Dragon Shield. Dragon Shield sleeves are the only sleeves that I trust on my cards, and I've been using them for nearly 7 years. Their petrol matte sleeves are my personal sleeves of choice, and if you use our Dragon Shield link to get yours, you will be supporting the Mind Sculptors channel. So go ahead, go into the description of the episode, click on our Dragon Shield affiliate link to get your sleeves today. With all that said, let's get into my conversation with Josh. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's a friend of the podcast is our drunken friend, Elder Drunken Josh. And
that's what they call me sometimes.
That's what they call you. You did really well at what was it, Oktoberfest with Brawlin in Shabraz. Was a pleasure to see that go. And like we really that was like the first time I feel like you and I actually got to talk.
Yes.
We've like kind of like talked,
like passed by on Discords.
Yeah. But we've never actually got to sit down and chat, and we talked a lot at Oko, so it was really cool. But so we talked about this idea of how you kind of feel that playing casual EDH makes you a better Magic or a better player at cEDH.
100%, yeah.
And I think this is a really intriguing idea because I feel like a lot of people who play cEDH will look at you and be like, well, what do you mean? You're just there to goof around. So when it comes to this sort of idea of playing casually makes you better competitively, what is sort of the like thesis idea behind that?
Well, there's a lot of little reasons that kind of combine together to basically just form the ultimate conclusion that when you play casual EDH, you just become a better Magic player. It's putting the cEDH is very narrow just by like the nature of how cEDH is, and you want your format to be super narrow. You want your decks to be as efficient as possible,
right?
And a lot of times, people who only focus on the competitive aspect of stuff miss a lot of other parts of the game that could inform their cEDH play or improve their cEDH play because they're focused on grinding cEDH games. I think also the environments that you play casual EDH in are much more similar to tournament environments, paper tournament environments, than the environments that you play cEDH in normally. Like when you practice cEDH on like the RCEDH Discord or any online space, unless you're specifically practicing for chaos tournaments, like it's not going to help you much for actual paper in tournament practice. And what I mean by that is like just being used to being in a loud, distracting in-person play environment where things happen that are outside of your control and you need to be able to react to them. And like, so like, at Tier 1 Con, like one of the people who was spectating a game, like accidentally said something that revealed information about someone's hand. Yeah. And like that's something that you just got to be ready for in a tournament. And it's something that occurs all the time when you play casual though. Like at the LGS, you get people watching the games. They'll make a comment about a card in someone's hand. And like, because it's a low pressure environment, it gives you the opportunity to practice those types of scenarios in a way that, you know, you're more prepared for it in a tournament.
Right.
Maybe you notice a spectator looking at someone's hand at a tournament and you're like, hey, I actually did that at Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
My friend Jason was with me and spectating, and I had to like, it's actually in the vlog. I had to be like, dude, you cannot talk while you're spectating a game. You're not allowed to say anything. You're not allowed to point the phone at my hand in a way that people can see it.
Right.
Like, like you need to be quiet.
That was one of the things we talked about on our episode with Lua, Reed, Ian, and I, where we were kind of like debriefing, where it was just like one of the things we thought was really interesting about Oko was that at least in the first handful of rounds, there were a lot of people who clearly had never played competitive Magic before. Which I thought was a very, very interesting, because as like a judge, I'm used to like walking into the tournament hall and like, all right, we're on our game face. It's very, very interesting. I
think a lot of people are not prepared for the tournament environment. Right. And I think honestly, this is a bit of a controversial thing to say, but like if you are very comfortable playing in the casual environment and you could play cEDH, you could play your deck tight while having a side conversation, while saying something distracting to another player, like, and the people you're playing against are not fully in that tournament mentality, you could totally just derail their entire game plan by asking them about their day. So like, that's something that I've done before. Like in my round one, I literally was like, I really don't want this ESON player thinking about his game plan. So I like asked him about where he learned the deck and stuff like that. Like, and we, so I think when you play a lot in a casual environment where you'll get hit with those distractions, you'll get someone come up behind you at the LGS and be like, whoa, like I bought that pre-con too. That's an awesome pre-con. It prepares you to like be able to like either have that side conversation while still playing the game and practice that, or practice being like, hey buddy, like I'm in a game right now. I'd love to talk to you about this afterwards.
Right.
Because I've had people come to me in tournaments too, because they thought I had just finished my match when I was like tanking my combo and be like, so what are you doing after the tournament? And I had to be like, not right now. I'm
still figuring out this round. Let me.
Yeah. I don't know what I'm doing after I cast my dock side. Never mind after the tournament. So
that's funny. One of the things that I did at the tournament that I kind of like started practicing going and doing was like, especially as a control player, was I have this tendency where I want to play with my cards the whole time. And what I started doing was I watched Ken, and since then I've watched Brian do this. But instead of just constantly looking at my cards, I just like, on my turn, I'm holding them. I'm kind of, you angle them a little bit. That's the other thing that kind of kept happening at Oko was I kept seeing people's whole ass hands. Yep. And I was just like, hey, angle your body. I can literally see your whole hand, and I'm not trying to win that way. But like, it's just setting my cards down, looking at what I draw, putting it down, and trying to do that. So that way you can like avoid those sorts of things. And that's a like good practice. But that being said, I think this is a really important topic because this is sort of my reasoning for it, though, is that cEDH is in this point where for like the last really forever, cEDH has really just been a casual game. It's just been casual EDH, just dialed to 11, right? Now we're starting to see tournaments. We're starting to see real leagues. We're starting to see real competition, actual competitive EDH emerge. And so there are things that you need to learn in order to be effective at that. And part of that is the social dynamic. So with that being said, we talked a little bit about this pre-show, but when it comes to deck building, and obviously we all kind of have our deck building philosophy that we do for cEDH, right? Like, it's like, okay, so my deck has Chromox, Soul Ring, blah, 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 all this stuff. What is it that from a casual perspective, what does that bring to the table for a deck building?
Well, I think casual, the card pool is like probably like 500, 600 times bigger than competitive EDH. And so when you're building a deck in casual, if you're trying to build it in good faith. And what I mean by that is you're trying to build a casual deck that will play appropriately at the table you're envisioning playing it at. You're not trying to be like, I'm going to play a casual deck that's going to make my friends want to play cEDH with me because they can't play casual with this deck. It's going to ruin them every time. Like, that's not playing casual. That's pub stopping. Right. But if you're building a casual deck in good faith with the idea of like, it's going to be balanced against like the decks that I know my friends are playing, and it's going to be prepared to face like the multitudes of strategy. Like in competitive EDH, you really only got to be prepared for 3 or 4 different things, more or less.
Right.
It's like you need to be prepared for graveyard combos. You need to be prepared for like Oracle Console, and there's a few other like niche things that you really need to watch out for. In casual, you could die to combat damage. You could die to any number of random combos. There could be graveyard bullshit. There could be just someone could just out tempo you. Someone could just outvalue you. Someone could put some ridiculous game state changing instant or sorcery or enchantment into play out of nowhere.
You can only attack left.
Yeah, like stuff like that. And you need to build your deck to prepare for basically every instance, which is, I think, a deck building exercise that a lot of cEDH players could really use, because it helps you evaluate not necessarily what cards, because you're not really using the same cards, but like what effects are important for essentially preventing you from losing. That's like a difference. And I think in cEDH, you're trying explicitly to win. In casual, a lot of times you're trying not to lose as quickly.
Right.
And I think
it's interesting though, because like in Brian's like what was it? His breakdown of his blue farm deck is he talked about in it is that it is a deck that has the ability to get in there really quick if it needs to, but also is ultimately a grindy control like mid-range deck, as he describes it. Mm-hmm. That, which first of all, when he said called blue farm a control mid-range deck, I felt so vindicated. I've been calling it that for so long, and I was just like, he gets it. But the idea that, you know, he always wants to make it to turn 5. You know what I mean? If he can make it to turn 5 with a deck, then he's doing good. And so there is something there about like playing not to lose. You know what I mean? I know you play to lose, but
I do play to lose. The train conductor.
For those who are not familiar with the card, there is a commander from New Capenna. Is it from the commander deck, or is it from
I have
the
no
set
idea.
proper?
No idea.
But it is named to lose, and Josh does have a delightful competitive deck called that is.
It's not my list, actually. I took it from my friend Alice. It's her list.
Okay. Well, yeah. It is still delightful. I love that deck.
It's really fun to play.
It's a fun deck to skull clamp. Because you draw cards, I draw cards, everybody.
I know. I was like, I had that realization in our game. I was like, well, if I play my commander, she only has 1 toughness and she'll die.
See, it's like you're happy, I'm happy. It works out for everybody.
It was great. We both draw cards.
But it's so interesting because you talk about that, where there was a period of time in cEDH where we used to call, for lack of a better term, what we would describe as like inbred metas, right? Mm-hmm. Where you were only seeing interaction that was dealt for specific things. Mm-hmm. And you would see less and less of the mana drains and of the, spell pierces and the things that hit wider things. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because you really do, when you're talking about like a casual environment, you really do have to be able to be like, okay, so I need a Rec Sage effect. I need something that can deal with artifacts, enchantments, because there's going to be something that's stupid.
Yep. Someone's going to play like Helm of the Host or Lithiform Engine, and you're going to have to kill it or lose next turn. So,
yeah. So that's really interesting, like perspective in it. So for you, when it comes to your deck building, do you have like any like examples of things that you have taken straight from casual and brought over into lists that you play in cEDH?
Oh yeah, I have a really good example. The card Occult Epiphany in Brawlin and Shabraz is one of my favorite cards in the deck. Every time I show the deck list to someone, they tell me to cut the card. They don't understand what it does. And what it does is it draws you and discards you X cards, which is like pretty mediocre. I don't actually think it's even the best draw X, discard X that you could run. I think Read the Ruins is better for explicitly that purpose, but I'm not running that. But what it does that's really good is it makes a bunch of 1/1 spirits. And like, that's something that I learned when playing casual is sometimes just having a bunch of creatures is really good. And I won my my quarterfinals match because of Cult Epiphany. The spirits killed multiple players. I'm not even joking. They literally won me the game. I had 4 spirits, and like someone had to steal one to prevent themselves from dying. It was awesome. So like, and I think it's because I had that realization because Brawler and Shabraz, it's a turbo deck, but it's a turbo deck that doesn't mind being in a stalled board state, because if I'm in a stalled board state, I still have like a 5/5 commander. That's fine with me. So a lot of the philosophy behind the deck is I want cards that are good both in a turbo situation and a stalled board state. And I think most of because honestly, because I pretty much only play turbo decks, I really don't like playing mid range or control. I play like mid range decks that are secretly turbo decks. Yeah. Because I'm not very good at playing the long game. Like my quarterfinals match, I literally said, "Is this how Charles feels like all the time?" I absolutely hate this. I came up to him later in the day and I was like, I just played a match that was a 3v1 for 45 minutes and it was stressful and exhausting and I don't want to do it ever again. Why do you play to this situation every single game you're in? You're some kind of demon man, Charles.
We discussed this at Oktoberfest, but Charles has done some, deal with an eldritch deity. We don't know who or what or why, but because of that, he has unbelievable luck. But
he's also really good at casual EDH.
Yes, he is,
Charles. And the reason for that is because he will play casual EDH the same way he plays cEDH, which he's trying to create a situation or a board state in which he's advantaged and he can just use his words and a few cards every turn cycle at the most to keep that advantage until he wins. And that's a lot. That's a lot of casual decks game plan. Right. Is to have the best board state and then just talk everyone into letting them win in the next 3 to 4 turns. And so that's another way that you could either, if you're playing a deck that's trying to get into a combat related scenario where you're beating everyone to death, or if you're scared that you'll be in that scenario, I'm playing Rograk Silas, I cannot win in that. If the game state gets to that point, I lose. And so it's good to practice, see what things, if anything, you can leverage in that kind of game state. And that's not something that you'll see that often when you're playing cEDH, but you get to practice that game state almost every casual EDH game. And go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Don't worry.
Also, in those game states, threat assessment becomes huge. And I see this a lot with cEDH players is they don't really remember how combat stuff works. I think there becomes a point in a lot of stalled out games where combat just becomes far and away the best way to win. And I think a lot of cEDH players don't realize that as quickly. And I think they're still trying to stop combo attempts when they're getting beaten to death by a 4/4 flying haste. Yeah. And so I think if people played a little bit more casual, they'd be able to recognize oh, I've seen this play out before. I lose in 4 turns if I can't stop this.
Right.
So
and that's one of the things that I've always had to explain to people with threat assessment is because especially with Arden is people will see it do the skull clamp thing once and be like, oh man, you're going to win with this. I'm like, no. This is the most fair use I could possibly have of this ability. This is I'm literally just the police. That is all I'm doing. I'm just
and your deck, I think your deck is a deck that plays similarly to a casual EDH deck in that not that it's a casual deck and not a good deck, but you're trying to create a game state where you can basically outvalue the board, beat everyone to death, and then sometimes you win with Oracle Console and sometimes you win with swords. And that is a lot of similar game. A lot of casual EDH decks have I have really good creatures. I'm going to attack with them. Sometimes I oops into a combo. And so playing against, I feel like playing against casual decks prepares you to play against those kind of decks. The other thing too is a lot of casual players don't play in good faith. They can be kind of mean. And I think being able to identify when someone's trying to shark the table at it, be able to sit down across from someone and be like, all right, that guy's got sus vibes, I think is an extremely useful cEDH skill. Being able to be like, I don't like how that guy's looking at my commander. I don't like how they seem to be thinking about, they're asking questions that are making me nervous. I'm going to be watching them for this game. I think they're probably at a higher skill level than the other 2 opponents in this game. And that's something that's super common in casual. There's massive skill gaps, and being able to identify and then exploit those skill gaps is really important for cEDH, especially if you're in the early rounds of Swiss, or if you haven't won the early rounds of Swiss. Right. So like, there's a lot of times where in casual, someone will make, like, they'll go to Doomblade something that shouldn't be Doomblade, and you have to be like, whoa, buddy, let's put that back in your hand. Let's think about this for a second, and then you have to like talk them into the correct threat assessment play. And that's something where I see so many. If there's so many cEDH players after a tournament, it's like a stereotype. We're like, I lost a game because player X just didn't know what was going on and did something wrong, and like, that's kind of your fault. You should mind control player X. You should be like, player X, like, what you're doing is causing this, and it's gonna have a bad outcome for us. You need to explain why. And like, that's something that you don't get a lot of opportunities to practice for cEDH practice, because I feel like most people do the collaborative cEDH thing, which is great for knowing your lines, and it's great for knowing your deck, and having your opponents like be like, oh yeah, no, you need to like exile these cards to breach and then get your grinding station and whatever. Like, that's helpful for like learning your combo, but it's not helpful for when you actually need to execute it and your opponents don't have your best interests in mind. So yeah.
let me ask you this, because this is very interesting. Is because it feels like to me like you're coming at this very much from it's a social game. We need to talk with our opponents, right? And not like, because it really comes down to, it feels like to me, is that there are two sides, I feel like, in cEDH right now, where there's the group who are like, hey, board needs to talk, all of these things, and then there's the other group, which is the shut up and play player. And you know, how in a like does the shut up and play stuff translate in casual, do you think, or is it just not a way to play at all in casual play?
There are definitely casual players who have my roommate is a shut up and play type of person in casual. Like, he plays Voltron, and you could beg, you could argue, you could say all you want, but he'll say shut up and take 21 damage. And like, I think it's a thing in all types of Magic. I think being able to because like, it's not even, I wouldn't say that being like shut up and play is a bad table talk strategy. I think it really depends on you as a player and a person and what you can leverage. Right. If I feel like, because I use both. If I feel like I either am disadvantaged at the table to the point, like when I played against Reed and Linden in Punt City, I shut the fuck up.
My condolences.
I won that game. I won it. I did it. But I was like, okay, I know for a fact both of these guys are more experienced table talkers than I am. And this third person is just going to get mind controlled if we turn it into an argument between the three of us. So I'm going to shut up and let them fight it out amongst themselves. Yeah. And that was something that I don't think I would have been able to identify and do if I didn't play casual EDH so much. So I think that's an important skill to have. So, and then also just being able to like know when it's time to shut up and play, and when it's time to try and like get some extra information from your opponents, direct them into doing something that might prevent the table from losing or stuff. Being able to make that assessment is something that takes a lot of practice. And I think if you're a less experienced cEDH player, you're not going to get a lot of opportunities to make those assessments in cEDH practice games with more experienced cEDH players.
Right. Yeah. And so, you know, it's interesting because we talk about how in the earlier rounds of the tournaments, right, you see these kinds of, as you would describe it, it's easier to mind control people into doing things. And, you know, something you learn when you play at the LGS, which is something, you know, we talked about, I don't know if we've said it on here yet, but is that a lot of people who play cEDH play online. Which is I think we said this earlier in the show, which is a much different environment than when you're playing IRL, whether it's, you know, all the distractions you mentioned, but even just reading facial expressions, you know, tone, body, all that stuff. What is it that if you are a cEDH player and you're wanting to hone that skill, how do you learn to play collaborative cEDH at a casual table?
Well, I think I think you should keep collaborative CEDH to the CEDH tables and be as cutthroat as possible at the casual tables, which doesn't mean pub stomping. It means, well, what I would suggest is getting an unedited precon or borrowing someone's weaker deck and trying to shark the table with the weaker deck, because you're gonna have to manipulate players. There's no other way to win with a weaker deck in casual unless you manipulate players. Right. It's gonna force you to practice those skills, and it's also gonna force you to identify like which players will be like. If you can identify which players are making big plays in the next few turns, you could point that out to other players and try to get them to do something about it. It helps with your threat assessment because you really don't have any other way of winning besides being like, please stop him from casting Creator Hoof on his turn. So it's actually like a really great learning experience and a really great practice environment, just trying to be cutthroat at casual with a weaker deck. I don't think you learn anything if you have a stronger deck than your opponents, or if you have an equal deck and you're just way more skilled than they are. But if you're like, hey guys, like play your favorite decks. I bought this precon today. I want to try this. Like, that's a really great way to learn, because you're going to see, first of all, like a lot of casual players would love to tell you about their deck and their strategy. Right. And so it's like very obvious when someone's gonna pop off, and you can start to learn tells and stuff like that. And then also you can also practice, because a lot of casual players also are doing the same thing. They're trying to look for your tells. They're trying to look for like what you're giving away. They're going to try and bluff. So you can also practice having that used against you. One thing that I learned in casual is I noticed my roommate, Kevin, sometimes will like just call when I have interaction in hand. And I was like, how does he do this? How does he do this? And it's because when I had an interaction card in my hand, I would shuffle it to the front of my hand and then move all the other cards in my hand besides it when it was my turn. And I had to break that habit. But like, I was like, how does he do this? How does he do this? And it took me a while to be like, oh, he's watching my left hand. There's a lightning bolt in my left hand. Like, and so that's something that you literally can't learn online. You can't learn that playing online. Like, I only know one person in the entire world who plays with face cam online. I know one cEDH player in the whole world who uses a face cam when they play online. Yeah. And like, other than that, like nobody else does. And I think you're doing a disservice to yourself if you show up to a paper tournament and you haven't practiced paper commander. I don't think it needs to be cEDH. I think just paper commander in general is the best way to. I think honestly, casual is a better environment to practice that stuff because it happens literally every game, almost every turn cycle.
Yeah. I'm really blessed because we have a few years ago, I took over the commander scene in the league here in Lincoln. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they did was I kind of turned it into a Friday Night Magic sort of league. So it was like competitive, but it was just, bring your best deck, do what you can. And, we'll play it through the season. And, I stepped back once I started making content, but I've started going back and playing more. And I was at the lowest table and I was sitting against like 3 other really good decks and players, and I was just sitting there and I was like, okay, this place is leveled up.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is a lot of casual players are not like, I think there's an assumption among cEDH players that casual players are bad at EDH. No, casual is straight up harder than competitive EDH. Like straight up, like as someone who's played both I played casual since 2010, I played cEDH since 2013. Casual is straight up harder. Being a successful casual player is way more difficult than being a successful cEDH player because there's just so many more factors that go into it. The card pool is bigger. Your like pool of opponents and decks that you have to go against are bigger. The strategies you have to prepare for are bigger. And if you just go over the top and build a better deck, no one will play with you. So I think it's honestly more difficult. And because of that, I think cEDH players have a lot to learn from a lot of casual players who might just like be playing casual and not cEDH, maybe because they just don't really care for cEDH, or just because they just haven't been introduced into the format, or because it's stigmatized. But some of the best Magic players that I've ever played against primarily play casual. Brian Koval is a really, really good casual player. I played casual with him a lot at Oktoberfest, and I was just really impressed by not only his casual play, but also his casual deck building. It was just fantastic. He was doing a lot of unique stuff. He was doing a lot of cool stuff, and he was balancing it to like a reasonable level too, which was wonderful to see.
I think a lot of people, for some reason or another, just wasn't expecting Brian to be as savvy as he was about the format. And
because he's a good Magic player.
He is an excellent Magic player who did his homework and learned the format for like basically 2 years and like really studied it, and then also studied EDH and is a lover of that stuff. And like he takes it very seriously, and it's been really cool to see his dive into it. I got to play with him in his very first cEDH game with Pleasant Kenobi, and that was an interesting game. I will say that.
I know Pleasant Kenobi plays cEDH. I've only heard him say bad things about the format.
Well, it's Vince,
Yeah.
He just says
stuff. He does mostly say bad things. I really like his content, but I
do
had
too.
no idea he plays cEDH.
I like his content too. I also like Vince, but he's really good at the content game, is how I usually describe it. He really knows how to hit SEO and all that stuff.
Yes.
So let me ask you this. Because there's this interesting thing here where, not to, be that guy, but, I've talked a lot about the way in which like Survivor plays into like EDH and the like social dynamic of it.
I was hoping we get into this.
Oh, okay. I'm glad. Because a lot of the things that I kind of feel like that bring to the table with that analogy is the idea of, a great example is in my 7th round match, I was playing against Surreal and 2 other players. And Surreal, like every turn, we were on the cusp of losing to him. And the entire time I had to, the other 2 players and I had to like have players meetings effectively to like, okay, how do we not die to this? And we were like, okay, we have this, we have this, we have this. Okay, cool. We should be good for this turn. Let's see if this works. Okay, break. And then like that was the whole thing. And the moment I had an opportunity to win, when I hadn't had an opportunity up until that point, I immediately took it and won the game. Nice. And it's one of those things where it's like, they were my teammates for 99% of that game until my window opened, and that was my chance.
Do you think they saw it coming?
No, nobody saw it coming.
That's okay. So like, I feel like that's like a really good example of why casual is a great environment to practice it, because that kind of stuff happens all the time in casual.
Well, and to be fair, I didn't even see it coming. I did top deck like a god, but
hell yeah.
It was the best top deck I've ever seen in my life. But you're right. It is something you see a lot in casual, where it's like all of a sudden one player has a window of opportunity and then they win. Yeah,
and it's like the thing that happens a lot in casual games is like you'll have a player in a dominant position. Mm-hmm. The other 3 players will be like, all right, we got to take him down. We're going to blow up his mana rocks. You kill his commander. I'll counterspell his next thing on his turn. We got this. But then all 3 of those players are also still scheming to win. And so it's you have to be able to make alliances with players while also being like, I still don't trust Callahan. I know he's got Thoracle Console in his deck somewhere. And I know he's just 1 tutor away from getting me.
Right.
So I think that's something I noticed at Oktoberfest, not so much of the other tournaments, but Oktoberfest especially was like, there's a lot of people who, if you just like approach them in a really nice way about the collaborative cEDH thing, they'll just like default to it.
Yeah.
That's not good. That's just a tournament. You shouldn't be letting me tell you what to put into play with your commander or your Oswald or your or tell me what to put into play with like your tutor that you're tutoring for a stacks piece to stop somebody.
Right.
But a lot of people, I think, we're not ready for someone to just be like, hey man, like I see what you're doing, but did you consider like the following things that like probably weren't on your mind? You should do this instead. And a lot of people are like, wow, this person, okay. They don't think much past it. I think that wouldn't work on a casual player for the most part. Most of my friends who I play casual with, they would be like, yeah, how inappropriate can I be in this content in this podcast? Side note.
Oh, go for it.
All right, because they'll be like, yeah,
just don't get me demonetized. That's all. They'll
be like, yeah, I got a card that can help you right here. That's what my friends would do if I was like, trying to do that collaborative thing with them. My combo is like right here, buddy. So like it was actually like, I was like floored that actually worked multiple times at Oktoberfest. So I was like, well, don't you want to do this instead? And they're like, huh, yeah, I do. And I'm like, all right, there's no way.
Yeah.
So I think playing with people who are trying to socially manipulate you, literally every play that you make might be beneficial to a lot of people, because I think everyone's used to helping each other practice is what the feeling that I got. And even with me, I sometimes fall for it, especially if it's someone who's like in my practice group and they give me like what sounds like a good faith suggestion, and then I I'm like, oh, you were sandbagging. You told me to interact there, and it happens, and like I'm always thinking about this stuff because I love it. It's my favorite part of the game, but I get got a lot by like people I trust. So you can't. You have to. Yeah.
Oh, just one of the things I've really learned playing with like Pongo and playing with Sick in Spleen is that like they're always talking, but the minute they start talking about what you're doing to the rest of the table, that means they don't like it, and that is like one of those things where I will like always say this now is it's just like anytime Pongo mentions something in a game, I'm just like, hey, just a heads up. I don't know if you've noticed this, but Pongo hasn't mentioned a thing up until this point, and now Pongo's talking. I think that should let you know that it's probably not the best to listen to what Pongo's saying.
Yeah, and that's a great heuristic that you can use when you're playing against people who are trying to table manipulate like that. You can always be like, well, let's look at the patterns. Like, what were they saying before this null rod got played? Or like, what were they saying before I put this heuristic study into play? Nothing? Yeah, so this probably stops them from winning. And like that's something that it's really good to have a plan for when someone tries to do that. You need to have like some kind of like, all right, well, this is what I'm going to say to derail this person if I think they're going to say something about this. And in order to be able to form that plan, you have to recognize when that person is going to try and say stuff. And so I think the best way to do that is putting yourself in those situations all the time. And those situations occur most often when your way of winning is 6/4/4s and not a combo.
What are you talking about? I never try to just win with combat damage.
So honestly, like you're one of the best people to talk to about this, because your deck is such like a casual style deck. It's trying to create those scenarios where you can just out talk the table and everybody's confused, and then you win out of nowhere.
One of the things that I really like about Art and Silas is it's very easy to sit and have a conversation with. When you play your commander, you do the thing and somebody's like, you should probably remove the Arden, and you can sit there and be like, listen, Arden, do you really want to waste your piece of removal on Silas? Like, is this really what you want to use it on, or do you want to wait and hold on to that for the, win con stuff that is coming from the commander reliant decks? I can function without my commanders. They can't. And I've said that a lot. And it's one of those things where having this is one of the social dynamic things that I've talked about a lot, is that the commanders you choose like really say a lot about you as a player and how people perceive you. Because if you sit down with Arden, people are like, okay, so you're doing something with equipment, and then but okay, well, that's probably not that bad of a deal. And then you do the skull clamp thing, and you kind of have to walk your way through skull clamp a little bit. But
that's like one of the really important things I don't think enough people think about for tournaments is your first impression on the table is going to influence how people interact with you.
Yeah.
If you show up, everyone's like, this guy is scary. Holy crap. You're probably going to face more resistance if you show up and they're like, this guy looks tired as all get out. Or you show up and like, wow, this guy's just here to have fun. So I think, and that's something that a lot of casual players do intentionally, is they cultivate a game persona.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of CEDH players also have a game persona that's not necessarily beneficial to them winning. I think if you play more casual, you'll learn that like being kind of sharky is a good way to get you targeted.
Yeah.
And being nice is a good way to make people forget that you're their opponent.
I mean, you've played with me. That's one of the things that I do is I'm just over the top. I'm a goofball, and that's me the entire time.
You're great at it.
I goof off the entire time. And it's like part of it is me just trying to have fun, but like also part of it is just like, you know, if I can get you to laugh, that might make you not want to. It might make you more willing to listen to me than
exactly
if I show up and I'm like, for our audio listeners can't see what I'm doing, but I'm just here. I'm going to do this, and that's all you need to know, right?
They know.
You hear the sound and you know what I'm doing. Is because you know I've sat down across from those players, and everybody's done that at like a modern tournament, right? As you sit down,
well, it's different than 1v1. You don't have to like your opponent or talk to your opponent in 1v1. But in Commander, if you don't talk, you'll get targeted.
Yes, and it's one of those. That is exactly why I don't like 1v1.
Yeah, we've had this conversation before. We're both not 1v1 fans.
I have tried to play Modern so many times. People are like, you got to give it a chance. I'm like, I have played Modern on and off again since 2012. I was like, I think the format's really cool. I hate playing it because I sit down and I try to be funny. I try to like interact with my opponent and they just won't talk. And I'm just like, fine, I don't want to play where I can't sit and have like, because there is a part of me that just wants to like talk to people too. But if we aren't going to sit there, like one of the things I've said a lot of times is if I see somebody just laying cards down onto the stack and not saying anything, I immediately am like, we need to, one, point that out, two, like, pay close attention to that person because that person is like very intentionally not saying things.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's no easier way to target someone in Commander than being like, that person's not talking. They're clearly plotting something, or they clearly think that saying anything will reveal the fact they're going to win on their next turn. Yeah. So I don't know, blow up their mana rocks because we don't know what they're doing.
I mean, that's Lou kind of joked about this because in the game that we played, she was like, I knew you had a win in your hand because you were like not talking and you were like, yeah, that's fine, whatever. And you weren't being you. And she was like, so I knew you were like onto something. And I was like, fuck, I gotta be more goofy.
That's why I think there's two ways that you can try to hide those tells. And this is like not a Magic thing. This is a gaming, a face-to-face gaming in general thing. You can either, and it's really obvious in poker because there's like two types of players really who are like, I don't know that much about poker, but I watch it a little bit. But like, there are players who like obfuscate and have ridiculous over the top like outfits and do like silly things during the game. They're just taking so many actions. It's hard to determine what is a game related action and what is a non-game related action. Then you have the players who have sunglasses on. They're stoic as all get out.
They have headphones on, you know.
Yeah, no emotional reaction to anything. And like you'd be like, are they even looking at the cards, or are they just playing by like feel? Like,
yeah.
And I think there's advantages to both in a lot of games, but I think in Magic, being silent is not a good thing when your opponents could be like, well, that guy is sus, we need to do something. I think it's way better to be jovial and talk to people, or at least like be friendly and be like, hey guys, like I hope we have a really good game. It's serious Magic time. Let's go. Like even just if you are a serious player who cannot play like with a side conversation or cannot play with somebody making jokes or saying things about the cards as they play them, then that's totally valid and that's totally fine. And you can ask your opponents to shut the fuck up. That's totally cool. But like you need to make sure that your impression of the table's impression of you is somebody who's not being like, shut the fuck up so I could beat you, and just being like, hey guys, like there's a judge call in the last match and someone got a GRV. I just want to make sure we're all playing tight this time. Yeah. Like you need to make sure that your opponents trust you, basically.
Yeah. It's so interesting because this is one of the things that I think I don't think enough cEDH players get, but I really see when I play in my casual experiences with like Chase and Scott and, you know, the list of people that I've played casual with, because honestly, I have not had many opportunities to play casually outside of very, very, very early on playing Magic, because my play group was just so competitive immediately that I had to either get on board or find a different group, and they were my best friends. So I was like, all right, Thrasios file it is. And from there on, like, I haven't got to play a lot of casual, but since I've started to play more casually with some of these other creators, it's interesting where it's like the way I tutor changes now, where it's like, okay, there's this thing, or I can get the fun thing, right? Or I can get this thing that will impact that board state. And it's interesting how the decisions you make, even if they aren't too, because like a good example is in like Qatari. It has the top combo is just in it because it just is. All the cards synergize. It's not on purpose. I've had multiple opportunities to like play that out, but I'm like, either one, nobody's going to have fun with that, so nobody's going to want to play later. So that, makes me more of a target again the next time I play this deck. Or two is if I play this now, it's going to not happen, and then I'm going to be the target for the rest of the game because they're going to be like, hey, they have this thing available. And it's like changed the way that I've tutored, even in competitive games.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because like that's kind of what I was saying with one of the unknown, like not unknown, but like lesser thought of difficulties of playing casuals. If you just go for it too often, you're either going to get 3v1 to every single game you play, or just no one's going to want to play with you.
Yeah.
And so I think like learning how to like read the room is a really important casual skill and could be translated into cEDH really easily.
Yeah.
Like really easily. And like what you're saying, like the way that you tutor is like what you say when you go get a card, how you respond to someone when they say, what are you getting? Which is something that I always ask someone when they tutor. I'm like, what are you getting? Or I will try to guess the card they're getting. I was like, oh, is it Fierce Guardianship to the top, that Vampire tutor? Or like, because like their response will give me information. So it's good to be able to like have a heuristic again for when someone asks you what your tutor is. Like cast Vamp tutor, and they're like, oh, it's on turn 1, and your opponent goes, oh, it's Mana Crypt, right? Like you need to think in your head, like, am I going to say yes, it's Mana Crypt, and just reveal it to the table so they leave me alone next turn? Or do I say something cryptic? Like you need to. I think almost every single play in casual comes with that like verbal defense of what you're doing for a lot of groups, not all groups, but a lot of groups. And I think a lot of cEDH players could really benefit from a little bit of deflection from their plays, like especially like the tutor plays. If you're casting Demonic Tutor and you're not winning the turn that you cast it, there's going to be table talk about what you search for.
Well, like I think a really good example of this, though, in cEDH is, we've talked about Brian a lot on this episode, but think about that finals match. Like, I think it was like turn 6. He tutors for a Rhystic Study with an E-tutor. And I'm sitting in the booth and I see an E-tutor go onto the stack and resolve. And I'm like, oh, this must be a win attempt. And no, it's just a Rhystic Study. We're just chilling. And like, he even said after the fact, like, my game plan in that finals match was, I'm just going to hang back. We're going to see what happens, and we're going to go with the flow. And, it worked out. And I feel like a worse Magic player would have just tried to. Thanks, Athena. I really appreciate that. Really appreciate that you just did that underneath my. That's going to be underneath my audio, and I hate it when that happens. But I really feel like a worse Magic player would have just gone for it.
Yeah, it takes a lot of confidence just to sit tight for that long.
Yeah,
like a lot of confidence. I wouldn't have done it. I'm a hair trigger type of Magic player.
I loved that he did that, because I was like, that is such a like, all right, well, let's just hope we draw something. And like, that's like very much my style of play, is to just like let the game kind of develop and deal with things as it comes, instead, because like I've tried playing the proactive strategies, and I'm just like, man, I really just, it's very obvious when I have a win when I'm playing proactively. Whereas if I play like very adaptively or reactively, and I just kind of sit back and let the game kind of come, is I tend to not be as, for lack of a better word, cocky. And like, I've noticed that in myself, and I'm like, okay, so my success rate has gone up when I have taken my, like, how much I am being proactive down. Cool. So there is definitely a correlation there for me. And that's like something I've talked about on this show too, is like playing to your strengths.
Yes.
And, you know, I don't think enough people do that, is playing to what you do well as a Magic player.
I think a lot of cEDH players don't play their strengths because they don't think their strengths are worth playing to.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Like, I feel like you're very confident in the fact that you can play that control game. And I think a lot of cEDH players are not confident that they could do that. I think that's another reason they should play casual. Because it's not as hard as you think. I hate doing it. That's why I don't do it. It's also one of those things where
I think part of that, though, is because, like, in cEDH for so long, there has been this... we've always talked about how it's like, well, everyone is a combo win. And, you know, Charles has kind of come along and been like, I would just play mono white, win commonless stacks, and win, you know, go undefeated and almost win a tournament. You know what I mean? Or, you know, you have me on the other hand, who's like, you know, I really like playing control. I want to play control, and I want to play actual control. And it's interesting to see how that kind of plays out, because it's one of those things where, like, you have to be willing to challenge. I feel like part of it is I really like being like a contrarian secretly.
What? Secretly?
I always like, and this is one of the things I like proving people wrong, is if somebody says I can't do something, I'm like, no, fuck you, I want to do that.
That's why I play Brawlin' and Shabraz.
Very, very funny. Like, a good example of this is we were at Charles's birthday party, and he was like, we were at this Asian food place, and everybody had chopsticks, and I've never used them before. And he's like, oh, well, you know, it'll take you really long, and there's a lot going on, so, you know, we don't have the time for you to figure it out. And I was like, no, fuck you, I'm going to figure it out. And it's like, all right, how do I do this? And then, like, within like 5 minutes, I got it figured out. And it's just that part of that is who I am as a person. Is it's like, if you tell me I can't do something, you are just guaranteed that I'm going to do the thing.
Callahan, you can't lose to me at Magic.
No. Oh my goodness. So
I don't know if that one will work.
We'll see. I mean, I certainly have lost to you at Magic.
Have you? I actually don't. No, yeah, you one game. I beat you in one game. I think usually when we play together, what happens is we take each other out and someone else wins.
Yeah, you and I just kind of bonk each other, and then somebody is like, okay, Thoracle, and we're like, yep.
Yep.
That's
how it goes.
That's how it is. So finally, let me ask this kind of here as we're wrapping up. Okay, so I've made this decision. I want to play more casual. I want to expand my play group, and I want to learn more of EDH as a format, because it is one format. How do you suggest doing that for people? Because, you know, obviously, again, like I said, we've talked about, a lot of people are in these online spaces. How do you, I guess, break out of that?
Well, I think for starters, you have to be okay with dealing with some people who you may not like, because that is just what talking to strangers is about sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of cEDH players have trouble getting over with, is they'll play a casual game and they'll be like, that was toxic. And like, yeah, it is the most popular format, so it's going to have the most toxic people in it, because it has the most people in it and is the lowest skill floor currently. And what you get, well, I don't know if the lowest skill floor, but like it's the most accessible. It's
the most accessible format by like a country mile.
But like what you'll learn by doing that is how to deal with toxic people, because they're in cEDH too, and they will try to be toxic in cEDH games. But also, like, you're going to learn how to find not toxic people.
Right.
And like, so most of my play group is from various clubs and game stores that I've been to. And I'm not really the type of person who enjoys playing in public spaces, because various reasons, but like I just get very frustrated with people who are playing Magic just to pad their egos, and I butt heads with those people a lot. Yeah. And I usually find it better for the community if I just leave. So what I normally do, I've been doing it for like years, is I'll go to a play space, I'll play it for a few weeks, and then the players who I think are like cool, I'll like get their Discord, get their phone number, and bring them over to my apartment to start my own practice group. And most of my people who I practice cEDH with in person, because I have like a little practice group of like 6 to 8 friends, most of them started at casual, and I trained them up to play cEDH. Or like 1 or 2 of them are the people who taught me how to play cEDH, but the vast majority of the group is people who like, I went to my college Magic club. I really liked this person. We played casual together for 6 to 8 months, and then I was like, hey, this deck that you're building with Rurik Thar, this is like 20 cards off from a cEDH deck. Would you be willing to try a cEDH deck?
Right.
And yeah, and then that's how that happens. And that's the other really nice advantage to playing casual is you can build your own cEDH testing group with like people who are your friends. So if you say like, hey guys, I'm going to Tier 1 Con. It's my first cEDH tournament in paper ever. My last cEDH tournament that I went to, I scrubbed out with this deck, and I don't want to do that again. I'm having a thing at my apartment. I'd like you all to come in, target me every single game, and try to distract me while I'm playing. Thank you. And like I did that, and it worked amazingly. I top 16 Tier 1 Con. Yeah. And like a lot of the stuff that I was playing with loud music, I was playing with people intentionally trying to distract me. I was getting 3v1 to every game, and I learned a lot. And because I had friends who I made playing casual who were willing to be like, if I give you beer and pizza, will you target me for 4 hours?
If I move out to your neck of the woods, you're going to love me because I have severe ADHD and need 9,000 things going on in order for me to pay attention to a thing.
Yes. I feel like that's part of why I do so well in tournament environments is I like could use the ADHD brain to take in all that's going on around me and then focus on the important things, but then also drag those unimportant things into like the table space when I feel like it'll distract the other players.
Yeah. I totally get it.
There's been multiple times where I've been like pointed out something at another pod, be like, whoa, did that guy just ad us on turn 3? Crazy. Just like, because I want to see people's reactions. Do they have it in their hand? Are they doing something similar? I want to know what my table thinks of this other person's play.
Yeah. I think it's really fun to see how you approach playing the game because and this is something that I don't know how I'll ever be able to do it, but I want to do like a in-person like game of Magic that is filmed almost like Survivor sort of, so that you can get those like reactions in a way where you can see those things play out in real time. Because I feel like a lot of the time it's all like, you don't see that stuff in the same way that you do in content because it's brought from a perspective of making the content where it's everybody's in person, everybody has a face cam, everybody's on camera. And so you see all that happen and then like talk it back. And I have no idea how I could make that happen, but if somebody wants to sponsor the channel and throw me a bunch of money, then I'll do it. But Josh, it's been a pleasure having you. Where can people find you? I know I named our recording session here the Drunk Sculptors. So for people who don't know you, where can people find you?
I am 1/3 of Elder Drunken Highlander. There's also my co-host Kevin and Austin. Kevin's the Elder, Austin's the Drunken, and I'm the Highlander. There's 3 of us. We have a Discord server dedicated to brewing casual decks mostly, and specifically like weird casual decks that like when you look at the deck list, you're like, what? Stuff like Prismatic Piper Storm, where the goal of the deck was Prismatic Piper is our commander. It is the objectively correct choice to play in this strategy. No other commander will do. Which we built that and it works great. It's because it's a colorless white card. You can clone Pearl Medallions and make it free, and then storm off with it, which is hilarious. And like weird stuff like that, or like is it life gain? Rurik Thar Spellslinger. We just like to build weird decks. So if you wanted to learn more about casual deck building, our Discord is a really great place to do it. A lot of people who are way better than me at casual deck building are on there. Someone's building mono green clones on our Discord right now. What? Because you just tutor Bramble Sovereign into play and then play populate effects.
Okay.
And you clone like Thorn Mammoth and stuff like that. With Thorn Mammoth says whenever it or another creature enters the battlefield, it fights something. So if you have 5 of them. So
LOL.
Yeah. So that's one of we have a Discord. So we have a YouTube channel where we post. Lately, it's been a lot of cEDH stuff because I've been a little obsessed with cEDH the last year or so. We also post casual stuff. And we frequently do charity events under the moniker Every Donation Helps.
Hey.
So yeah, that's those are where you could find me.
Well, that about wraps things up for us here today on this week's episode of The Mind Sculptors. Thank you for tuning in. If you liked this episode or any of our other episodes, please make sure to rate the show on whatever podcast platform you are listening on. Or if you are watching or listening on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and tell us down in the comments what your favorite part of the show was, or just your general thoughts. I would also like to thank our top tier patrons, Justin, Adam Hamden, David Snevely, Dionysius, Jason Bialik, Josh Stein, Matt Boehner, and Senior Coupon. If you too would like to support the show, you can head on over to patreon.com/The Mind Sculptors or check out the link in the description. Thank you again for joining us, and from all of us here at The Mind Sculptors, I'm Callahan, and we'll see you next time.